All right, what's up, everyone? This is Coach Richardson, and this is another episode of Becoming Uncommon. I have my good friend here, Kevin Reid. Coach Reid is someone that recruited me back in the day. So
Long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. But I got to see him, and he's mentored me, given me advice, been able to kind of guide, and has been what I would consider a huge pillar in the combined event community within the United States for so many years. And we have so many stories, traveled international together.
Good times.
Been
Good
around
times
the
over the
country
years.
together, like a lot of meetings. I've watched him navigate even things that a lot of coaches don't think about, is like some of the politics, even like being on committees and being involved and not just complaining about things, but being, an advocate for change and being in those rooms when it's probably a lot easier just to kind of sit back and complain about it. But being there and helping with not just the NCAA, but within USA Track and Field. So with that, Coach Reid, you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah. Like I said, like Coach said, name's Kevin Reid, and I don't even count anymore.
Yeah.
But we're closing in on probably 40 years at the collegiate and professional levels, and it was kind of fun, and it's just kind of weird, kind of how things happen sometimes. Because my undergraduate degree's in marketing and business, and my every intent was to go that direction. That then post graduation, get a couple opportunities, and I don't know if they were opportunities, but they were also, I guess there was an opportunity to kind of hang out with some pretty good decathletes back in the day and be a part of at the time, which was a pretty good little training group. And then, but it then just kind of seemed, again, all the intention was to get into business and go that direction. But, just kind of year by year, just kind of, again, still, I don't know if you can call it training. I don't know if I was really training or not, but, kind of started training a little bit less and coaching a little bit more. And so for me, the coaching thing just kind of, it was all about being in the right place at the right time, and taking advantage of opportunities when they were put in front of me, and was doing that for a while, had the chance to work underneath a Hall of Fame coach, who had done it for years and who had set a pretty high standard, for the program there at Azusa Pacific. And, was lucky enough to step in there. And I look back on that and, with a little bit of time and that kind of stuff, I mean, I remember feeling a lot of pressure, he retired with, again, without knowing the numbers, with, 8 or 9 national championships and Olympians and all that kind of stuff. And, kind of step in, and took me a couple of years to kind of get my footing and, but then was able to, have some good recruiting years and with a lot of good references from coaches. And it's still, still small school setting, but, ended up with a couple pretty good athletes.
Yeah.
And, then it's kind of evolved, and now I'm 40 years into this and looking back, and it's been a great journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when it comes to your undergrad and that kind of aspect, like what are some of the things that kind of led into you coaching? Because kind of went through that real quick, obviously getting provided an opportunity, but did you go into college like saying like I want to coach, or I'm open to coaching or getting into that world?
No, really my intention, going to school was, like I said, my undergrad's in marketing, and I'll get my master's is in education, so obviously once I kind of got into it, I followed a couple of those professional routes that you need to do to kind of stay at this level. But yeah, no, it wasn't my intention at all. Like I said, just, hung out, and we're going way back on this, but with Dave Johnson, and again, just being a part of that little training group. And like I said, it's just kind of evolved to where, just started getting more and more involved in the coaching aspect year to year. And, when he decided to step away and go into a administrative position, I was handed the keys and had to take it and run with it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, again, Hall of Fame coach, he had an incredible career. But even when I was working with him, he gave me a lot of autonomy, to do my thing. And, and if I made a mistake, he'd pull me aside and we'd adjust it, but, as a young assistant coach, I was given a lot of autonomy, and I think that set me up well to be a head coach.
Yeah, because like with coaching, it's not necessarily something a lot of people go into college thinking like, I want to be a coach.
Yeah.
Some people do. Some people like. I think it's more common now. It's more professionalized, but even like I mean that's pretty recent. Even like coach people going into school wanting to be coaches.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think people just kind of like me, as kind of stumble into it. Like I relate to that when you're talking about like going into the business world because I worked at Wells Fargo for 4 hours. Because I was like, well, I want to make money, so I'm gonna go where the money's at.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, and like this was right after I graduated. I worked till lunch. Called the guy. I was like, I'm not coming back, man. I can't do this.
Really?
Yeah, I just can't do it. Yeah. So because I was still coaching like high school stuff, and I was doing it. So I just want to. This is what I want to do. And
Yeah, it's kind of fun because working with with different athletes and to see them do track and have their careers and have to see athletes that you coach kind of transition into that business world. It's hard sometimes because you get stuck from kind of your own schedule, in terms of being a coach and a lot of flexibility, to going to Wells Fargo and oh no, you got to be here at 8 o'clock. You can't leave till 5 o'clock.
Have an hour lunch.
It's a different structure.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a rough transition. Sometimes.
Yeah. I wasn't ready for it. No one prepared me for that. So going back early coaching days, like who were some of your mentors? Like who were some of the specific individuals that really allowed you to kind of blossom into the coach that you are now?
Yeah, again, I did, right place, right time. Being like I said, my head coach when I was at Azusa was a great mentor. And then through the old visa program. Again, we're going back into the 90s, with the visa program and being able to get involved in the camps and everything that we used to do with that, being able to work with Cliff Roberto was an amazing coach to work with. And again, I'm going to call them coaches, but just a great man to work with. Harry Mara, was, a big part of the visa program, but, being able to work with, again, guys like, Cliff or Harry. I don't want. I hate throwing names out because I'm gonna miss somebody.
Yeah.
But a lot of different influences. What was his name? He was at Tennessee. Bill Webb.
Yeah.
Bill Webb.
Yeah.
Webb's. Bill's Bill.
Yeah.
And but I had we had opportunities to sit around. Like when we were doing the visa clinics, just to sit around and talk and about training and different training, and there's not just one way to get things done. And just being able to hear from coaches like that, and just a ton of respect for everyone that I've really had a chance to work with. But again, kind of through the visa program was really introduced to especially the combined events early in my career, and with those kind of guys, now I'm just so passionate about it. It's fun now.
Yeah.
Or it's always been fun, but
I think because I think back, like a lot of the pride that I have in coaching is thinking back to just those individuals and guys like you and Coach Rada, who I know put like their blood, sweat, and tears into the sport, into the event, and like my thing is like, you guys poured into me, so I want to make you proud. So like everything that I do is like I've always kind of operated. I need to hold the standard.
Oh yeah.
And like I've always operated from that. It's like I don't want to default from the standard. Like, and that's because it's hard. And I'm sure you felt where it might have been easier, like in those heyday of especially with APU, like just to phone it in. Like, yeah, you've achieved so much, and it's like a lot of people don't realize being successful is probably harder than sucking.
Oh yeah,
there's more work that goes into it.
And I think the bigger part, and I think I've gotten a little more philosophical, as I've gotten older. But I've come to realize that being able to work with guys, again, just pulled those couple names out, but there's the list is long, and it's I think to me now that process is more than success on the track. It's doing things the right way, and not no shortcuts. There's just there's grinding it is the way to do it. There's this stuff that when you got to get it done, you got to get it done. And I think over the years, probably more pressure from that end, just keep on doing it right. because if you keep on doing it right, the success on the track, that's honestly, that's the easiest part. I mean, I'll talk about training, talk science, and the rest of that. That's the easiest part. But to continue to come in every day, keep grinding, and just to do it the right way, because those guys did it the right way, which is why they, did it for as long as they, did it
at that level. Especially, because that's where it's interesting now, like, because I constantly try to reflect as a coach, like looking back at like how things were, and I have nowhere near, like, you've doubled my coaching experience in that way. Like, so I'm sure that even now you are looking at, like, it's different. Coaching now and the sport in and of itself is different now.
And recruiting and just the mentality, of this next generation, it changes. And you can't just do things how you've always done it. It's got to change, and the coaching ed part, I think is huge. People talk about, where a record's going to go. Look at what these high schoolers are doing. I was like, you know what? I think that's, and I know you're really deeply involved with USATF and the coaching ed part. I think we've done a really good job. I mean, people are going to have, there's always going to have people they're being throwing darts at you, no matter what. But you look at what we've done the past, several years, and I think that information with what we've done in coaches ed is filtering down, and we're getting some really good high school coaches that have committed to that coaching ed process. And I think it's more than the shoes, it's technology. We were talking earlier about pole vault and steel or bamboo, and technology is going to push the sport. And right now it's the shoes. But bigger than the shoes, I think, a lot of the baseline, the foundational science stuff is being taught. And honestly, I think some of the stuff that we're seeing in high school these days, I think is a direct result of the quality of our coaching ed program, and us, with the coaches registry and even if it was a forced entrance into that, they got involved, and I think we're seeing the results of that, at the high school and the college, and I mean, it's everywhere.
So, I mean, to kind of sidetrack a little bit with that is, I'm looking at it, and part of me, along with, like that, all those factors that you brought up, but even like to the point of like talent identification, like being able to say like that kid's fast, like, or saying like that kid, or even I think Mondo Duplantis is probably like the most iconic depiction of like he had a true outlier route, and it's been interesting to kind of see that. And I know like a lot of people have a lot of opinions on the trackflation of things, but I think it's exciting. I think it's going to be something that we're going to look back on and realize that we didn't appreciate enough of this like resurgence of our sport. But for you, early in your coaching career, what are some of like epiphanies or big takeaways that you still have today? Like, because I can think of many stories where there's like eye-opening moments or like very pivotal moments, like in my early coaching career, that helped really, really shape who I am today as a coach. Can you think of any of those moments?
Yeah, I think some of those moments are, I think, again, tied to just a bigger philosophical look at it all. And like I said, I think the coaching part and the science stuff is super important. But it's easy. It's laid out, and you come up with training plans and that kind of stuff. But I think more than that is the investment in young people, and coaching. Coaching is caring, and to really to get to the highest levels, there's got to be such a deep level of trust between the coach and the athlete, and that can't just be a really good athlete and a really good coach. There's got to be a baseline, I mean, really core level relationship to be able to have that success. And I'm not talking just about success, at the Olympic podium level. I'm talking about just, with the majority of our teams, and just, PRs and the commitment to just really what is a daily process. It's not just there's more to it than just showing up every afternoon and doing a workout, and just building that relationship to where the athletes build that trust in you. And that's built with relationships.
Yeah.
It's not just coaching. There's a lot of really good coaches out there that haven't, and they've had good athletes, but maybe haven't got to that highest level because they focus in on just the science. Well, psychology is a science too.
Yeah.
And
That's a big one.
I think over the years that's probably the biggest thing. That
Yeah.
there's more to it than writing workouts.
Mhm.
There's being out there, during warm up times. Maybe walking a lap or two, with the athletes. Hey, how's everything going? Well, this is a little. I know you're sore. That's fine. How's everything going? What's going on? How's life? Is life good? Because there's going to be ups and downs. And I think establishing that relationship with, and again, you get bigger teams, and that's hard. But really trying to maintain it, and and the attempt of trying to touch base, with as a goal, every athlete every day. And if you get you're in a bigger team situation, that could be a little rough to get to everybody every single day.
Yeah.
But just the continuity of reaching out and touching base, just on the personal level, I think enhances what we're trying to do physically.
We're talking about like publishing and book stuff, and it's like, oh man, what if people steal ideas? And one thing that I always, and I talk to some coaches about this, is that I put all my work, like I have Google Drives, I share everything, because I stole probably 90% of it anyway. But like, just because somebody has a workout doesn't mean that their effectiveness as a coach is going to translate.
Yeah.
And it is about like that trust and that care and that relationship. Like, you're going to ask athletes to do things that they don't think are even possible. And if they feel that you believe in them, like, that's going to take them to that level. And that's very unique. Yeah. That's because like, it's a lot of, I think that's overlooked a lot.
Yeah. Cause I remember times, kind of being out on the track with different athletes, and, them wanting to go and do a negotiation session, before a hard workout.
Yeah.
And being able to have, those, I'm not gonna say they're hard conversations, but they can be intense conversations, and they feel like they want to do this workout because I used to do this workout, and I always ran good after this workout. And just being able to listen and talk back and forth. And I think you get to that point to where at the end of that conversation, everything is good. No matter what you did as a coach, whether you agreed to what they want to do just to make them happy and feel like they won a battle, or whether you make, small adjustments, or you just like, hey, that's great, you want to do that, but we're still doing this. And you walk away from that relationship, and they go out and kill that workout, even though it's not a workout that they may have necessarily wanted to do that day. They trust you.
Yeah.
And again, being able to have that conversation, when they really want to do something, again, it all goes back to relationships.
Yeah. No, it's funny you say negotiation, because my daughter, who's she's a future heptathlete. It's in her blood. She was born during heptathlete. So she had to do some striders or something. She goes, all right, what if I like jog back? Like, I was like, oh, it's starting already. She's only 10.
Oh yeah.
Yep. She's already starting the negotiation. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, that's funny. I want to get into a little bit of like your leadership. You've led very successful teams. You've been a part of a lot of, different dynamics, with obviously seeing multiple generations kind of do it. What are some of the big things you take away from like leading a program, like leading a team? Obviously, like, I love the fact that you touched on, because that's something I deal with, is you can't get to everybody. Like, you know what I mean? Even though you would love to have that relationship with that athlete that you don't maybe work with on a regular basis, it's like, it's hard. But just in general, like, what is some of the philosophies that you have with being, a leader of a program and a team?
Yeah, and I mean, that's an interesting question, and I think it's hard sometimes, because in a leadership role, especially dealing with a team, there's got to be structure, and the hard part with that is when there's structure, sometimes there's consequences, and and being able to, honestly, it's still an ongoing struggle you put it down because you really do. You have to have that structure. But then the human side of you, you want to be able to give a kid a break sometimes, and that's hard because sometimes those breaks really they can really help out that individual, but at the same time, sometimes the hard line is going to teach them just as much, maybe more. To when they miss a practice for, again, there's always a reason, but okay, you're going to sit out. You're sitting out this week. Those are the team rules. Yeah, but I was like, that's hard. And I think there's still a place, to kind of be, I don't know what, if you want to call it soft, a little bit. I think there's time for that, but I think that's something that just kind of has to develop over time. To draw that hard line, but at the same time to be able to listen, to what they're saying and get them to understand why that line needs to be there. And I think that's hard sometimes.
Like when it comes to like building a culture, what are some things that are like your staples that you kind of like hang your hat on, like that, as it relates to being, having that team? Obviously individuals need their thing, but like for you, what are some things that you found have been kind of like your cornerstone?
I mean, drawing boundaries, and I mean, on, and even the simplest boundaries, which are where they're showing up on time, getting in workouts, kind of, when they're on their own, and, getting them to, again, to me, it comes back to commitment on what you want to do, and that culture, because culture is once you have it established, it's great. But it doesn't take much to chip away at that foundation, and then you're back at ground zero, trying to work it again. And especially in the college track and field setting, it's a little rotational sometimes. I think you can have a great group and a really strong group of leadership, and they're helping provide that culture. They're going to be gone in a couple of years, and now you got to, it's a continual search to find those leaders that are going to, just black and white are going to be able to hold to the standards that you've set, and it gives the young ones, they come out from day one and they're hearing it from the coach, but that's just coach, but when they're getting it from their teammates, I think it carries a little bit more weight. And I think the hard part of that is just that revolving cycle of being in school.
You can't keep them forever. There's some we want to keep forever, some we want to move on past,
and some you want gone.
So with that, then thinking about like coaching and like being a leader of coaches as well, maybe what is some advice you would give to like a coach that wants to be in this world, coach at the collegiate or higher levels? Like, what's some advice you would have for them?
I think the biggest thing, for young coaches to do is get involved. Get involved in the administrative level. Again, going back to where I kind of came from, obviously I took over a successful program. I was able to continue that for a lot of years, but when I started, when I was still an assistant coach at Azusa, it was kind of funny. It was, there was me and my coach and another coach out of Nebraska, very similar, good young assistant coach with an iconic kind of head coach. Kind of been around forever, super successful. And it was kind of funny, again, given autonomy, and I look at their situation, kind of similar to where, two iconic coaches, in the NAIA, with a couple of assistants that were doing a lot. Then all of a sudden, we both, again, because of who our mentors were, we both got pushed into kind of a leadership role inside the NAIA coaches, association. So we're going to meetings, we're, just doing all that kind of stuff. And I just remember like the first one, because we're both kind of on the same schedule, we kind of walk into this, executive meeting of NAIA coaches, and we're the only two assistant coaches in that room. The rest of them are all head coaches, and but we were both at very well established programs with great head coaches. But just being involved in that from the beginning, then you again just taking advantage of opportunities, and moving on up as a head coach, and all of a sudden you kind of get into that mode of being involved, and then I go from Azusa to here at La Verne, and inside a year I found myself on an NC2A committee, and then find yourself on this USA Track and Field committee, and that bleeds into this committee, and then that goes into once you start there, it's interesting. It's frustrating sometimes, being on the administrative side, dealing with people and some of their there's agendas everywhere, but just getting involved, and really when you get involved at that level, really trying to think about big picture, a big picture perspective of things that you're talking about in some of these meetings, and not just focusing on your own little circle and your own little world and the stuff that you're dealing with that, but making having conversations and really making decisions for the good of the sport, and trying to look at it from an outside perspective. Let's just look at all of it, not just my situation. If I don't, this bigger, broader decision doesn't work well for me in my situation, I just got to get better in that area, because I think that's the best thing for the whole sport. So if that's going to affect my success, well, I need to figure out, I just need to get better in whatever area it might be. So I think it's just involvement.
Yeah, because that's where watching and seeing that there's a lot of coaches that are aspiring to move up, and you've seen it from your years of experience. Individuals try to take shortcuts and cut corners and things, and for me, the individuals I've seen do that, it catches up with them eventually. But I love the fact that you're talking about involvement, because one of the pieces of advice I was be everywhere. You need to go to that meet even though you don't have an athlete there. You need to be around those guys. You need to be around those girls. You need to be around those individuals that are in that. That's how you're going to soak it up, and that's how I think you stumble upon opportunities, right? It's if you're not there.
and it's being available and having conversations, now, we talked earlier about the coach-athlete relationship, but I think those relationships, that model continues up, into the administration side, because you sit down in a meeting, most meetings are, here's the information, here's what it is, but, whether you go to the USATF annual meeting or whatever it might be, or the Coaches Association meetings, it's just being around and having conversations outside of the meetings, either before the meeting, after the meeting, in the hallway, hanging out in the evenings. It's just, again, it's being available and having conversations, and we're not backdooring anything, but it's just building relationships, with coaches, and if you want to facilitate change, you've got to be involved.
Yeah, I love that, because I think it's that's not the cools, the sexy stuff that's on Instagram or whatever, right? It's those things. It's putting in that level of work.
Yeah,
because I think if you have the chops to coach and do those things, like you said, success will come. So yeah, it's the uncool stuff that usually gets the job
it's
done.
just it's the coaching side that isn't on the track, which is when you get into it. No, it's probably 70-80%.
Yeah, it's majority of
isn't on the track.
Yes, I'd say.
That's the fun part.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go out.
I do that for free. Yeah.
Get away from the computer. Get out of the office. Let's just go to the track. I'm done doing this stuff right now. It's going to be there when I get back.
Yeah. Then I want to talk about you coaching on the elite side of things, obviously, and having Coach Bryan Clay and having so many elite athletes when you're at Azusa as well, and working with USA Track and Field with a lot of the development and kind of you've seen a lot of athletes be kids and then blossom into medalists. And so, but coaching on the elite side of things, what would you say the biggest difference between that and the collegiate side in terms of your coach athlete interaction?
I mean, stepping up into that elite level. I mean, just a ton more commitment to it. I mean, because you start dealing with people that, they're going at this, and this is they're trying to make a living doing this, and if you're going to do that, one, I think, that process is going to move you from being a collegiate coach into being a professional coach. And I think part of that, and again, and this is a hard conversation sometimes, especially with an athlete that you've had for a few years in the collegiate system, is, their desire to be professionals. Okay, well, you want to be a professional athlete? That's great. Well, that makes me a professional coach, and part of being a professional is getting paid. You know it, and that's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
That's really hard sometimes when you have an established relationship. But the extra time, the energy, I think, is, stays the same.
Yeah.
But the increased level of time and that kind of stuff, it's a big step up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, with your experience in coaching and traveling internationally, any, like reflections or stories that like really stand out, like most memorable moments and things like that, like anything, what would you say is like on that, that laundry list, that huge list, I'm pretty sure, but any of them?
Well, I think one was in 2004 in Athens.
Okay.
And, Bryan, he'd made a couple world championship teams and that kind of stuff. But we go to Athens, and he's dialed up. He's ready to go. Everything's good. We go through, and everything's good. And go through. I ran a solid 100. He won the 100 meters. And we're getting ready to long jump. He's done a couple of approaches. He's looking good. And then for the timing of it all, like earlier that morning, they'd started, I don't know, the 50K walk or whatever it was. And we're getting ready to long jump, and the walkers start coming into the stadium to finish. Okay. Again, so, it's a morning, it's combined events. We're in the morning, not a lot of people are there, but we have the walking community out there with us as well. And I don't remember what place it was, but the first couple Greek athletes came in, and the place just went nuts. Again, we're in Greece. I mean, they're finishing, their thing in the stadium. Pretty cool. And all of a sudden I look over there, and Bryan's at the end of the runway, kind of taking a knee, got his face in his hands. Look over there, and he's starting to cry. I was like, dude, come here. What's up? He's like, dude, the Greek athletes came in, and we're at the Olympics. That was his realization of, like, we're at the Olympics. It wasn't, it wasn't, in Sacramento at the trials. It wasn't, none of that. It wasn't get your uniform. It was, him getting ready to long jump. These Greek athletes start coming in, and that was his realization. Like, we're at the Olympic Games. I was like, that's great. Let's get back on the runway. We can talk about this later.
Wow.
So that was a pretty cool moment.
Yeah.
And he went back, and he jumped. I think he jumped 796. Had a good jump, and obviously went in. And had a great meet and picked up a silver medal. And the other one, a little funnier, was 4 years later. We're in Beijing, and Bryan, he competes like a seasoned pro and has a great meet. And so, it was kind of weird because, we go from the silver medal, then a world championship in 2005. And we get to 2008, and he's already gone Olympic silver. He's the defending world champion. You want to talk about pressure? Because gold was the only answer. That was it. I mean, you can step back and say, Olympic medals are hard to get no matter what, but we had kind of gotten to the point to where now it was kind of going to be anything other than gold was going to be a disappointment, so a lot of pressure along with that. And, he finishes the 15, and, I go back to, you've seen the movie Miracle, kind of after they win, and the coach is just in an empty hallway. It was kind of the same thing. I found a place where I was just kind of alone, and I was just like, I just need to sit here for a second, and Brian's out there, he finished the race, we saw him, all that kind of stuff, and he's going through media. Well, the medal ceremony is supposed to be the next day. That was the schedule. All of a sudden, I start hearing some music playing, look up at a monitor. They're doing the award. They're doing the medal ceremony like right now. This is a half an hour after the race. I was like, I can't miss this. And so I'm looking around. I see a hallway. Well, in front of the door in the hallway was little velvet ropes, like, don't go here. Well, the door was open. I saw it. It went straight out to the track. So I just take off, going down this hallway. I should have been shot. I got tackled by a Chinese army. Like, what are you doing? Just some random guy running through this hallway trying to get to the floor in the Olympic Stadium. And I don't know how I did it, because obviously there was a big language gap, but somehow I got them to understand that hey, my guy's up there, he's getting the gold medal. Yeah. I got to get out there. So I ended up watching it, and then I was escorted back out. But somehow I got the message across, and it ended up working out.
No way.
But yeah, no, that was fun. And I think that, you talk about things like that. It's fun to laugh about that now, but going back before that, back when I was doing stuff with Dave Johnson, just that concept of, again, we're at the Olympic Games, we're at the World Championships, but we're at a track meet. Yeah. Let's have some fun with it. And there's always a component of fun. Especially decathletes. Can't focus on anything for more than Yeah, so there's always fun stuff going on. Regardless of where we were at, what we were doing. We always had fun with it.
Yeah. Then what I always wondered, and I don't know what you think about this, is because you've coached, like, I don't think a lot of people realize you're very humble in this way. You've helped a lot of very high-end athletes, like not just the ones that you personally worked with or have, but like you've helped so many in so many different ways, whether it was like, hey, come do some some work here, come do this, or I got you here, and hosting events, and you've helped so many. Was there ever like an inkling to, because like I think people think about this a little bit, like, oh, let me coach at the Division I level, or let me move on and do this, and like, what were some of those things that
kind of going through it, and obviously being able to have some success at Azusa, there's a handful of opportunities that kind of came along, but I was always at a point to where I was at, and I was able to do what I wanted to do, and obviously you got to be at the right place, obviously resources help, but I was just in a spot to where, really I was happy with what I was doing. I was able to do what I wanted to do. I was able to do stuff with the collegiate team. I was able to do the elite stuff. And yeah, I look back on it, and I don't know if I'd change it. I've been given a ton of opportunities kind of over the years, and I don't know. If that path would have been the same if I would have jumped to a high level Division I, program after picking up some national championships and working with some elites. There's definitely opportunities, but I was just in a place where I was content and happy with what I was doing. I was given autonomy. I was able to do stuff. Yeah. So I look back, and I don't know if I'd change it up.
Yeah, I love it.
And being at small schools, I think one of the best things about, and I say being in a small college environment because that's where I've always been. But I look at a good friend of ours, Rob Jarvis, who's at the highest level, in collegiate athletic or in collegiate track and field, there in Fayetteville, and seeing him do a lot of this with his family, stuff I was able to do with my family, and I don't know that there's a better place for kids to grow up than on a track.
Yeah.
You know what? They can run around, do all kinds of stuff. This is probably a biased statement, but the majority of track athletes, love to interact with kids, and again, they're just having fun.
Yeah.
And like for me and my two boys, it was a great environment for them to grow up in. And I said I wouldn't want to pigeonhole that to say that can only happen in a small school setting. Because I think I said Rob's doing it with his son right now at Arkansas. Even one time it was at the big, I don't know what it was, whether it was a Mount Sac Decathlon or the California Invite, whatever it was, But Dan came down, was doing some stuff, right? And middle of Dan and Dave and all that hype, and my wife had something to do, so I had the kids with me, and they're just following me around the track meet, or my team's taking care of them, whatever. They're fine, they're safe. My wife comes out after her day, and she's looking for me. Lots of people, and all of a sudden she sees my son, 10 feet up in the air. And she's like, "Who is throwing my child?" Well, it's Dan O'Brien.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, "Oh, all right, we're okay."
Yeah. Pretty good throwing things.
Yeah. But I think, the track's a great place for kids to grow up.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that kind of leads into like the next thing, because one thing, obviously, like the track stuff and the coaching and the leadership, and you've always, at least as soon as I got into coaching, you've embraced me. Like you've always provided me with insight and guidance, and I've always appreciated that. But one thing, whether you realize it or not, that I've always gleaned from you is like how important family was,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing you be able to hold the integrity as you are as a man, but then also be a leader and coach at a high level and be in leadership. Like you didn't, like, I don't think anybody's perfect, and we all strive, but to see how important like you held on to family while you were doing all the things that you were
Mm-hmm.
doing, like that really stuck with me. And I'm sure, like I'm curious, like where that influence came for you, like to be able to kind of prioritize that and keep that the main thing.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to a lot of mentors, whether it be Cliff or Terry Franson, or again, the list is long, and seeing them talking about the importance of family, but at the same time, as a coach, as a leader, I think it's really important that our athletes see us as more than coaches. They can see us as parents, because to me, as a head coach, especially at the collegiate level, the responsibility that I feel when you're packing up and going to a meet, whether you're in a big bus with the whole team, or maybe just combined events, in a couple of in a van going someplace. I remember early on in my career, I realized just the level of responsibility. No, I got 5 of people's children with me in this van, and just obviously there was that responsibility of making sure we get to wherever we're going safe, and that kind of stuff. But even bigger than that, just that responsibility of, from sitting with a family, in the office and recruiting, that student athlete. There's a lot of trust from that family and those parents to hand their children off to you, and I realized that maybe not like super early in my career, but kind of early in my years, I realized, nothing really brought it up. There was nothing happened to bring it to that level, but I do remember, feeling that responsibility of, whether it's just taking care of, these parents' children, from the safety side, but also, okay, well, they're, like with Bryan, his family was an ocean away, and to be able, that responsibility to continue to work with not just that athlete, with that person, and that's a big responsibility.
Yeah, no, I love it, and you could see it too, like that
Mm-hmm.
level of care and passion that you bring to it. It's like it's deeper than just like, yeah, we're doing the sport, and yeah, like that's something that I for sure, respect and got from you. And
no, I appreciate that, and I think, I don't know if I think you're going to understand this, and the combined event people will understand it. I think part of that comes from, especially at the bigger meets, being able to go and see, watch these, guys or girls compete, they're going at each other. But then they get to go and hang out in the resting room, for an hour, 2 hours, 3 or 4 hours sometimes. And it's just, we're just hanging out.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to walk back through that door and we're going to be at each other again. But then we're going to come back in the resting room and we're just going to kind of hang out and be together again.
Yeah.
So that's a fun part.
Yeah. No, like my favorite Harry story, what made me think of that is my first U.S. championships. Harry made everybody peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Like, I think we got delayed because of discus or something in Indianapolis. And he was like, "You guys want some?" And I was like, we're getting in. And I think, Bryan was there, and that was Tom Pappas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, you see that level of camaraderie. That made me think of that for sure. But with that being said, I want to get into now, like the kind of the collegiate landscape, and obviously a lot of things have changed. A lot of people have opinions on stuff, but where do you see like that next phase of like college athletics?
We're in a rough spot right now. There's a lot of change happening, and I'm gonna date myself right now. But I love the amateur piece of collegiate athletics. I think we're slowly moving into an era of, if you want to call it semi-professional. There's a lot of money flowing around right now, and I get it. I get the part of it, and I get the whole NIL piece. But I think we're moving in a direction where NIL is not necessarily the right term for it anymore.
No,
because they're not out there representing. If you want to go out there and if you're in college and a local car dealership wants to invest in the college and invest in you, and come out and do a couple advertisements or a couple of appearances, oh great, go for it. But we're getting to the point where it's pay to play, and and I think we're missing the piece and and how active the recruiting boards are, and that kind of stuff. I think we're missing out a little bit on the commitment to the process, of a collegiate education, and going through ups and downs, and not just jumping into the portal, into the transfer portal because you're not happy. Well, work it out. Figure it out. I don't know if that's going to sit well with people, but I think there's, there's a growth piece that happens, in a college setting that I think is getting pushed to the side a little bit.
Because it translates to life.
Yeah. This is, and I had this conversation this morning with a recruit, and they're, they were out of Texas, and, just, I was like, hey, the track part's easy. We'll get you to run fast and jump far and throw far, and we can get all that. But, again, going back to the responsibility and to the parents, when you take off and go to school and you're, whatever, plus or minus 18 years old, you're going to be there until you're 22 or 23. You grow up a lot. I think, to me, those 4 years, 5 years in college, whatever it might be, you really become the man or woman that you're going to be in those 4 to 5 years. There's a lot of growing up, and making decisions, good and bad. There's a lot of growing up that has to happen in that time frame. And, and I get it. It's, at the collegiate level and the academic piece. And there's, there's a few majors that are there are some specific skills and knowledge that you need to pull out of that, but for a lot of it, the college experience to me is just the growing up. And again, I'm gonna date myself, but back in the day, having 3 or 4 roommates and trying to figure out the phone bill. And somehow it just seemed like every month, a third of the calls that were on that phone bill, no one seemed to have made. But we got to figure out how to get it paid, or dealing with deadlines from professors, or, deadlines from the school, or what. I think that's the process of education that really sets, students up to be successful, and just navigating that. And and the process of figuring out, where you need to go, when you need to go, and just that process of being successful, and dealing with deadlines and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of maturing happens in that time frame.
Because another piece of that you made me think of is just how it's kind of, in with Coach's Ed, it's making it more transactional versus transformational.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think there's going to be a lot of individuals that are going to, it's like, what can you do for me? And like that whole caring and impact piece, like that's going to get, I'm going to say it's going to get diluted, because I think the essence of coaches is what it is. But I'm thinking about, like, now are you going to have that time to develop that relationship to be transformational and take them to that next level,
Mm-hmm.
take them from a maturity standpoint? Like, that's what I'm probably the most scared of, is that are individuals going to be put in or allow themselves to be in opportunities to be guided and transformed and pushed?
Yeah, because that process is the same as the physical process.
Mm-hmm.
When we ride our cycles, and the next cycle or the next year, we what do you want to do? Increase our volume or increase our intensity, or whatever those physical steps are. I mean, you're going through the same steps.
Yeah.
Relationally with the athletes, and there's only so much you can do in a year.
Yeah.
And no, it's not going well, so I'm gonna go in the portal. I'm gonna transfer. Okay, well, you're skipping out on that process of, again, building that trust with that coach, and again, being able to develop that trust. That's a long-term process.
Yeah.
It's the same as the physical coaching.
And so with athletes now, you're seeing it at a lot of different levels, especially even now with the elite levels. What's some advice that you would give for, like, somebody that's looking at getting into the collegiate athletic side of things and want to take their skill set next level? Obviously, knowing what we know now, even though things might change, who knows, like, in a couple of years. But what's some advice you would have for, like, the high school graduate that's looking for, like, that right place?
Like from the athlete perspective, I think the biggest piece is finding a place where they're comfortable, and they can be who they are. They can be in a place where they're going to be allowed to make mistakes. And I was, it's okay to make a bad decision and stub your toe. Let's just not make that decision where you're going to break your leg. And let's deal with the little stuff and use that as the learning curve. But just being, again, open and available just to grow and to be challenged and to do stuff maybe you haven't done before, and be okay with that, and be okay with having a bad year, because that's going to happen. You're not just going to, that's great when it happens like that, and sometimes it does, but there's a lot of stories where have a good freshman year, down sophomore year, figure out a couple things, and come back and finish up strong. It's committing to a process, and again, finding a place where you're comfortable, especially on the track side, because especially, again, from my perspective, coming out of a small school setting, those athletes, the good ones that I got, they were in a spot where they could be comfortable with who they were. We don't have to get drafted.
Yeah.
We don't have that day where we're just sitting staring at our phone waiting for that call to come. We can, on the track side, we can make decisions about what we want to do. And I think they're going to be most successful, and that might not be where you may not be having the best financial deal. So it might just, you got to find a place where you're comfortable. Because when you're comfortable as a person, we've talked about it a couple of times. The track part's easy.
Yeah.
When our athletes struggle, when they're struggling in their personal lives, what do? They go to the weight room, or they go to the track and go for a run. Well, if that's your safe place, just think about how good that safe place can be once you figure out, the rest of it.
So what can we look forward to with La Verne as you're being in this program, kind of navigating that world? But so what are some of the things that you're excited about with your program?
It's just continuing to, I'm going on 10 years here now. but it's just a continual process to get out there. And again, a little bit of a bias on the West Coast towards Division three, just because there's not a lot of it. I mean, you go back east and Division threes are absolutely everywhere. Out here there's a D3 conference up in the Northwest, and there's us here in Southern California, and especially in California with so many, not so many. I mean, dropped off a little bit, but with the NAIA groups, the Division two groups, there's a lot of Division two schools out this way, and even the lower to mid level Division ones. There's a lot of opportunities out here, and just it's just a continual process to trying to educate kids on the who we are as a D3 institution, and the emphasis that we do have on academics, but then at the same time saying, okay, but that doesn't mean we can't be excellent, on the track or in the field as well. It's not, now we're D3. We're not just D3. We are Division three. We're proud of it, and the quality of the performances are showing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize it's like the level doesn't always indicate the quality of the coach. And sometimes, like maybe like basketball, football, maybe, but track and field, like there's some youth coaches. Doesn't matter NAIA, Division three, community college. Like track and field is like that is the sport. That is.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of really good friends of ours. In between Richie Mercado or John Turek.
Yep.
They're just high school coaches, but I think you'd agree with me on this. I don't put words in your mouth, but I think they are probably the two of the best coaches I've ever had a chance to work with.
Oh yeah.
But they're just high school coaches.
Yeah.
But you look at what they've done, kind of throughout their careers, and they've, had success at the high school level, and they've had elite athletes as well. And so yeah, it doesn't. I think for track, it really comes down to you got to find a place where you're comfortable and with a coach that you're comfortable working with, and then you just let it go from there.
Yeah. All right. Well, awesome, Coach. I appreciate your time. This has been a lot of fun, long overdue.
Yeah.
But it's always good to catch up with you.
I appreciate it.
Yes, definitely. All right. Other than that, definitely check out Coach Reid here at La Verne. And other than that, be uncommon. Thanks.
Thank you.